out, how way, ay, 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 ay. How way out, ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. How way, ay, 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 ay. How way, ay, 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 ay.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the bridge. Thanks for sticking around. We are going to continue the show and get Unpa Numpa in here to tell us about his trip to Mexico. So let me see if I can get him in here real quick. Sorry for the standby, folks. Oh, hello, Unpa Numpa. Welcome to the bridge.
Hey, good to hear your voice again, Kira.
Right on. So you've been on an adventure down to Mexico since last we spoke.
Yes, it was quite the journey. I'd never been out of the United States before, and it was an opportunity of a lifetime, and I was able to take advantage of it, and was there for 25 days, and returned about a week and a half ago, and I am back home in Swiftburg now, here on Cheyenne River reservations. I was proud to be part of a delegation that was comprised of indigenous people who spent significant time at the camps in Standing Rock. And we were guests of the Zapatistias for the National Indigenous Congress of Mexico that was held in the state of Chiapas, a city called San Cristobal, on May 26th, 27th, and 28th. A historic gathering. As I said, it was an honor to be invited, one of the honors of my life. To be able to sit in, listen to the Congress as it was in session, and to be there when they nominated their spokesperson for the presidency of Mexico. The election is July 1st of next year.
That is incredible. So there was some reaching out that was done by the indigenous people, in particular the Zapatistas in Mexico.
One of the best things that happened to me personally while I was up at Ochete Chicoine was the communique that the Zapatista committee released in September of last year, where they called or named what was happening at Standing Rock for what it was. And they declared solidarity with the movement, and they invited, ultimately, I think it was 8 North American nations were represented at the Congress.
Okay, so 8 different nations were there, and you were representing the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe?
I was holding it down for the Lakota Oyate.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Not the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. In fact, I was really proud on my ID badge that I was issued, and to be able to gain access to the Congress, they put Lakota Territoria as my country, and I was quite pleased and quite happy to see that.
So would you like to see something similar happening up here?
Well, when I was down there, I was able to grant interviews to television and radio, Zapatista in particular. And I told them we have such an organization up here called the National Congress of American Indians. And I called them what they are, colonized collaborators. And we need what the Zapatistas do have, which is a true grassroots movement, drawn from the indigenous communities in Mexico. And in your first hour there, I was able to listen to most of it, not quite all of it, but I heard a reference to one percenters. And I'd like to get to that more later in the hour here about some of the statements that were made in the first hour. But I emphasize the need that we model ourselves after Standing Rock on what the Zapatistas are doing down there, which is a slow, steady progress towards real autonomy, true sovereignty. And part of that would be to get away from organizations like the National Congress of American Indians and their one percenters, people who do not look like the people in my community that I'm looking at now as I talk to you on the phone. We have 30-some low-income housing units here in Swiftburg, and I can assure you most of them are not aware of what is happening at either the tribal, state, or federal level, even though the decisions made by those governments have direct impact on our lives. One thing that I carried back with me from Mexico is the absolute need for activists to start focusing more locally and quit worrying about national spotlight, national interviews. We have real crises going on our reservations, in our homelands, that have been ignored for generations now. Oil is a threat to life, but it has not killed anyone in my community today or on this reservation. We have problems like alcohol that kill us every day. If you can rise up in active resistance toward the threat of oil to our people, I do not know why these same activists are not rising up in active resistance to alcoholism, to drug abuse, to domestic violence in the home, sexual violence against our women and children. The movement needs to focus on these areas if we hope to achieve real change in our homelands. And I am going to be about that business for the rest of this summer, going across not just my reservation but to other camps, and begin encouraging people to get more active right within the community, right on their reservation, with their tribal governments.
Yeah, because, I mean, if people, just like at the local level, say people in their townships, really pressure the local government not to approve that permit, or, maybe do a fracking ban or something like that, they have to respond to you. And it's the same with the tribal government. If enough people really, scream and shout about something, then they have to at least have some sort of response to it. They're your local people. They're going to have to run into you at the grocery store and things like that. I mean, at least in theory.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so the loudest voices, for instance, on Cheyenne River, need to stop directing their fire at others, and if not at one another. And we need to start working together to address the problems that exist here, that exist in this community where I am speaking to you from today. That is what we really need to focus on. We have others who will carry on the fights in the courts, like my cousin Nikki Ducheneau, who is the Cheyenne River Sioux tribal attorney representing us in the case before the District Court of Columbia currently. They carry on those fights because they are able to. In the meantime, we have to deal with people that are so thoroughly colonized, that are so thoroughly Christianized in their thinking and in their attitudes and beliefs. That is what we need to address right now. We need to get our people healthier, mentally, give them the true history, give them true knowledge that they need to survive every day, the processes that affect them, and to encourage them in a good way and show them how to get involved in those processes. We are physically in bad shape. I spoke to this often on your program. The diet that we ingest, the alcohol that we consume, getting back to more traditional ways of eating, traditional foods, food sovereignty, making that a priority in our homelands. Here on Cheyenne River, all we have is land and Lake Oahe, yet we import all our own food. We need to change that. We need to get our people physically healthier, get them off of processed foods, get them off of high sugar, high starch diets that have led to generational diabetes now. I mean, we're not just suffering generational poverty, we're not just suffering generational, now we're suffering generational health diseases, where cancer is prevalent in families, diabetes and its associated complications are rampant in some families in our homelands. And then lastly, the spiritual component. Now, if you're not spiritual, if you're atheist, I suppose you can disregard this part. But for those of us who are spiritual, is to get stronger spiritually, to give us the strength to fight these battles, to carry them on in a good way, and not to get angry, and not to, when challenged by someone who does not agree with you, respond in an angry manner, to respond in as good a way as you can. And if they are not agreeable to that for whatever reason, then to put that person and their ideas in the proper place, which is behind you. Put them in your rearview mirror and move forward. There are plenty of good allies, plenty of good relatives to work with today. Thousands across not just the United States but the world. Connect with those people and leave the ones who you know you can't work with if you don't agree with. Leave them behind. Move forward in a good way. Always move forward. That is what I wish people would adopt in this movement. Any movement worth its salt that has succeeded in human history was able to be self-critical, was able to look at itself and say, this is working, this isn't working, this leader is good, this leader isn't good. And if that's where we're at now with our movement, I believe we are, it's a good thing. Our movement should be strong enough to withstand self-criticism and still continue to grow.
Yeah, and our post Standing Rock conversations that we've talked about, Standing Rock is everywhere, and the message that I received there was, go home and take this movement home with you, and protect the land and the water where you live, and that's exactly what I've done. That's why I joined the Blue Ridge Environmental Network. My own chapter, Earth Allies, and we're ready for. We've got 2 proposed pipelines here in Virginia, and we're mobilized and ready to keep them from even being able to lay them down, much less have to, Standing Rock style, go to nonviolent direct action. But we've got a lot of people ready to do that too, should our legal means fail, which frequently they do because it's a rigged system. So even when you have the law on your side and eminent domain attorneys that rock and all that, you can still get a judge that says, well, I'm just going to go with the status quo here.
Well, I agree with you completely on that. In fact, I am very nervous about court cases that are either in process now or are being encouraged to be initiated that affect treaty issues at this point in time in the history of the United States. We are up against not just an unfavorable or challenging federal court system, we're up against a hostile federal court system whose final arbiter, the Supreme Court, is now swung permanently to the right for at least a decade, if not more, to come. How anxious should we be to have these issues tried now? I like the Zapatista model, where you are as sovereign as you act, and they are acting quite sovereign now in the state of Chiapas and throughout Mexico. They are asserting their own sovereignty. They are acting sovereign. They are being autonomous. When we go into federal courts, we toss all of that aside, and we have seen the results. The homeland completely wiped out, and businesses allowed to run rampant, through so-called legal processes that are a joke and a sham, and where business always wins. We win these temporary victories. The decision rendered on Wednesday by the federal judge, being hailed as a victory. But again, it reminds me of December 5th. It's a hollow victory. Especially when one does some reading. Now, I've been out of the loop literally for almost 2 months now, as I know you're aware, but I do catch up on some news, and out from outside of my immediate concerns. And I read up on that case, and it was made quite clear that in orders of this nature, usually work and production are ordered shut down immediately. But instead, we're waiting until the hearing on the 21st is coming Wednesday, to see if he's going to halt production on it or not. But oil is flowing as we, talk and breathe right now on the phone with one another through that pipeline. And then the recent discovery, too, or recent discoveries of the leaks that have occurred already in the DAPL pipeline.
Right.
And the Rover pipeline in Ohio had a massive leak of fluids, as they call them, from their natural gas pipeline. At first, the company Energy Transfer Partners and their CEO, Kelsey Warren, admitted to a 2 million gallon leak when the actual number is a 5 million gallon leak, threatening waters there, threatening homes and lives there. So we're up against people who are dishonest, who are crooked. Throughout the process, I was told by those in the know who were employed by the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, who did have not just knowledge but expertise in pipeline construction, that they had viewed portions of the pipeline when we still were able to get access to them, and they knew that the pipeline was not meeting the codes that are set forth for it in terms of the rivets that were being put in to seal the sections in place. They were not the proper heights. They were not properly applied. We know all of this. So these leaks and these are leaks that we know about. Who knows what else is happening? Who knows what else they've been able to conceal? Are going to continue.
Yes. Who knows what else they're able to conceal? And like you said, it feels like a hollow victory. As long as that oil's flowing through there, it's not a victory, and it should be shut down. Given that that the environmental impact study was never properly done, never, all these things that are supposed to happen really aren't. So that's par for the course, and it's probably only going to get worse. So we need to be ready.
I was speaking with an attorney from the tribe yesterday about the Wednesday decision, and this attorney expressed to me the fact that the court, in its ruling on Wednesday, seemed to be more interested in the tribe's hunting and fishing rights being threatened by a possible oil pipeline leak underneath the lake. The tribe had, in its initial filing, emphasized the spiritual importance of Lake Oahe and the Missouri River to our people. And this attorney expressed to me dismay and sadness that the judge basically disregarded those arguments from our people. Another reason not to go into their courts is they have no understanding of us. None.
Right.
They have no understanding that the resistance at Standing Rock was based on spirituality, that people were drawn there because of their spiritual motivations. And many that I spoke with talked about hearing even in the ancestral call that we've talked about often. And the court just rejected that thinking out of hand.
Right. But they'll use it, not the court, but the so-called police or militarized police, they'll use that to enact their anti-insurgent techniques and wartime techniques against the people, because by labeling us as an insurgent movement with a religious component, they're trying to paint us like, terrorists. They're trying to paint us in the same way that they have Muslim people in countries where they're occupying. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same. And even before the intercept leaks came out, we talked about it on the show that you could look at an Army anti-insurgent manual and see how they were using each and every one of those techniques basically by the book against the people. You roll in a tank, call prayer a riot, and attack. Boom.
And infiltrate too, as we've seen. Who knows how much of some of the infighting that has emerged is not, motivated by that as well. You talked in the first hour about the co-opting of the American Indian movement, which I agree with. It was co-opted. And back in December of 2015, I in relation to AIM and Annie Mae, wrote a piece saying how we need to expose the leadership of AIM. But here it's really important, especially with the recent events at Standing Rock, to differentiate a movement between its leadership and then the grassroots who make up the movement.
Absolutely.
My mother was a member of the American Indian movement, left because of the abuses that she endured and saw others enduring within the movement. But that does not take away from what she did as a member of that movement and all the others who did. And many of them cannot help when leadership is not completely honest, it's not outright lies, and that they believe these people, men or women, that in what they're saying, and that they trust them. And it's only trial by fire and through experience that we learn who to trust and who not to trust.
Right.
I certainly know from the days of the American Indian movement, the leaders who are still talked about today, whether still with us or not, that I have respect for, that I will listen to, but most of them, and some of them are gone now. I tune out, and I just move on and will publicly say what I need to say when I feel it needs to be said about the truth about the American Indian movement, and I will speak truthfully about our own movement and some of the leadership that emerged at Standing Rock. And I will tell you, just Kira, I'm very hopeful that you extend an invitation to Alex and Deb Whiteplume to be guests on your show as soon as possible. I do not know either of them personally, although I have met both, and in Deb's case have been in her company. But I am just interested in seeing them given an opportunity to address some of what was alleged and said in the first hour.
Anybody Anybody is welcome to come on and defend themselves against anything that's ever said on this show. And the invitation was also extended to Dallas Goldtooth to come on, and he initially was interested, but then just didn't follow up or say anything. So, and I told him that too, equal time. So, absolutely. But as you know, I'm not an AIM approved
entity. No, you're not.
Yeah. So I often, don't get those types of names on my show because I'm not AIM approved. So, and then when I do, then I'm usually blown off as well. So that's happened as well, many, many, many times, as you know. And you're absolutely right. And I think that people who have criticisms for the current leaders at Standing Rock are really, they're the 99%, just trying to say, hey, look, we gave up our lives at this. A lot of us gave up our homes, our jobs. Like, how could you do this to us? There's a lot of people feeling betrayed. And so they don't know what to do with that energy. And they want the movement to continue in a meaningful way. And they wanted to win. And a lot of people really felt like we could win. So they want somebody to blame as well for that. So I think that's is what it is.
Well, yeah. What I really find fault with now that as more time passes since the assault on the camps that ultimately closed all of them, is that we need to be patient. And I have been saying it repeatedly because Standing Rock is everywhere. It requires patience, and it requires understanding and evaluation. I have encouraged individuals who I spoke with who have expressed feeling betrayed, as you spoke to, and left out in the cold, that they have it within their power to do something about that. We all do. We each must do what we can. And I will not sit back and listen to whining and moaning and complaining. I won't. Get off your ass, get out of your house, and do something. There are little guerrilla things that individuals can do themselves. Buy a can of spray paint and tag a public area when there's no cops or cameras around. Get out and do that. It might even make you feel good to do that. Start putting out literature. Everybody has access to the internet these days. This amazing tool that was able to help us build a movement can be used to print out information in basic terms. That is something I brought back from me with Mexico, from my time with the Zapatistas and talking with individual conversations easily in the scores. And before people and gatherings, I was able to talk to thousands, and I don't know how many more on the radio and TV. We each can do something. We each need to be doing something. We cannot just sit back anymore while the environment is being destroyed. We cannot. We each have it within us to do something. And the Zapatistas were able, over the past couple decades, to go out and synthesize a message that is quite clear. There is bad government that we are suffering under now, that we have suffered under from generations. It's bad government. It's the only way to put it. There is a chance for us to have good government. And until we live in a time where we can abolish the need for coercive government altogether, then we need to strive for as good a government as we can have in place. And this can begin at the local level. This can begin among extended families and groups of friends and communities in our homelands. Where we get together and we start distilling information, and both me and those that I work with have already begun this process of finding the resources so that we can print thousands of flyers that contain, in the most simple, basic English that I can express, what is currently the problem and what we can and should be doing about it. And those will start being distributed in Lakota country, I can tell you, by the end of this month. And
nice.
We begin to take care of ourselves. We do not wait for government, whether it's tribal, state, or federal, to step in and help us. Those of us who are awakened, those of us who are motivated, need to take this upon ourselves. If you're able to get to the middle of nowhere in North Dakota in the middle of winter, you're able to do this stuff in your own community during the summer. That's quite an easier task before you. And each of us needs to start thinking in these ways. It's funny that thousands can get to North Dakota, Kira, but these other camps, maybe it's a good thing they're small right now. I don't know. And there are many now. And I've had the opportunity to travel to 5 different ones now. And, they're small, but they're strong. And wherever I go, I offer what I feel are my insights, what I think could and should be doing. But the most important thing, if it's a spiritual indigenous camp, are ceremonies and culture. To have those going in camps every day. And so that those who come always have the opportunity to begin to learn about it, to begin their exposure to it. That is how we can start changing people one at a time.
Well, I'm really happy that the movement here locally is focused on the sacred. That this is our land and our water is sacred, and we're going to protect it. I'm really happy about that orientation. It's not it's not in my backyard type of movement. It's not in any backyard movement.
Right.
So we won't accept them being moved. They just aren't going in. And we will eventually win people over in terms of hammering home the message that you can't use, or you shouldn't be using, eminent domain law for private companies that are just profiting. That means that we're taking all of the environmental destruction risk. We don't even get any fuel out of it. So they've had these multi-million-dollar campaigns to try to convince people that we need pipelines when we've got plenty. So on the one hand, when we challenge that and say, no, actually we don't, we've got plenty, and all these are for export, then they say, well, there's a bunch in the ground anyway, so why are you fighting for what's left? Well, because it's my sacred duty. That's why.
There's no better way to express it than that. And even if one is not of a spiritual bent, do you want to have a habitable environment is a basic question. And we see increasingly every year more locations added where the water's bad, the soil is bad, the air is bad, and it's just ongoing. It was quite the experience. I spent significant days in Mexico City proper. And Mexico City, that I saw all my life on television and pictures on the internet, a beautiful city. But when you're in the middle of Mexico City these days, it's not so beautiful. There are 5 major mountains, and a few of them are active volcanoes, that ring the city. On a good day, a couple of them are visible through the brown-gray haze that enshrouds Mexico City. When you walk around the city, and we did extensive walking and traveling, bus, train, everything imaginable, automobile, even boats to get to some of the places we were going. In Mexico City, you get covered with a film by the end of the day, a black film, just from being in the city. The traffic is unbelievable. It just, I've been in all the major American cities, and the only one that comes closest to comparing to the traffic situation there would be Manhattan, New York City area. It's just, we're in a serious situation now. The environment is under serious threat. Right now in Mexico, there are at least 12 million people without access to potable water. They are forced to purchase on a daily basis bottled water. And then to further show that this unholy union between government and corporation that has always existed in the United States, now is throughout the world, in Mexico, the Coca-Cola bottling company is the main supplier of bottled water. They charge less for a bottle of Coke, a liter of Coke, than they charge for a liter of water. It takes 3 liters of water in their production process to produce 1 liter of Coke. It is a serious situation, and the fact that more people aren't awakened and motivated to do something about it is something the movement needs to address and get busy on. And right. It starts within your own family. Not everyone on my own family is on board. with the urgency of the situation before us. And so we can start very locally, start within our own family, start within our own communities, spreading the awareness, the knowledge. And I, for one, I'm boycotting Coke. I'm never buying another Coke product again if I can help it. So,
yeah, me too.
Bottled water or otherwise, is my personal resistance against that one company and the evil that they are doing in Mexico.
They want them drinking their poison instead of clean water that's going to keep you healthy. You got to drink their poison.
In some of the restaurants in Mexico, they don't even offer water. I mean, your choice is juice or soda. It's just it's insane, and it's endemic of a global problem, and the need for people around the world to wake up, not just in the United States and Mexico.
To water as a human right, because the fascists will try to change that whole concept as well. That water is.
Well, we already know they don't view it as such. The former chairman of the Nestle Corporation gave us that infamous quote from several years ago: "How water is not a basic human."
Yes.
So we know what they're thinking. We know what they're up against. What we're up against.
Right, and Nestle's been up to evil for a long time. They, I remember the first protest that my mother took me to in the 70s when I was a kid was against Nestle, because they were, they first of all went with these campaigns about how much better the formula would be in these countries, these very poor countries, and they got these women to start feeding their babies formula, and then they raised the price, and so the women would, they would have to dilute it, and their babies ended up starving because they got them off the breast and on this poison that they couldn't afford to even feed them. So that was the first protest my mom took me to when I was a little kid. So I've been aware of their evils for a long time, and they don't care about basic human rights.
Given what the oligarchs have done and how long they've been doing it for now, they are lucky they are up against peaceful, nonviolent movements.
Right.
I looked, when I returned from Mexico, I was doing a lot of thinking, and I spent a lot of time thinking and writing and doing some reading. And I just, I am struck by the grievance list that we have at this point against these people who do control most of everything that affects our lives. And the fact that we have remained peaceful, that we have remained prayerful when gathering in numbers, I suppose it's just as fortunate for us as well. But they're lucky that these are the ways we choose to resist. We will remain peaceful and we will remain prayerful, and just we need numbers now, Kira. We really do.
Yeah.
We need more people. We do have a good and healthy movement, but we need many more numbers to start affecting real change.
Yeah, and we need those numbers to...
Kira, if you don't mind me interrupting you real quick, that is another thing from the first hour that got stated that is problematic at the least for me, if not upsetting. And that is the claim that Red Warrior was a violent camp. As you know, or as I think you might be aware, Zincala Luzanja, the first camp that my family established up at Ochete Shikoe, until we joined with Wea Camp and then just became Wea Camp in October and in November. We were neighbors of Red Warrior.
Yes.
We were there I remember the day Red Warrior showed up at Ochete. It was the first couple of days after camp, and they began staking out their little area for themselves, setting up their perimeter and everything. And I got to know many Red Warrior people. In fact, two of the delegation that traveled to Mexico were from the Red Warrior camp. And I have nothing but the greatest respect and admiration for those people who were a part of Red Warrior, and they were not violent. And they were some of the most peaceful and certainly some of the most prayerful people that I knew at Ochete Shikoe. Not all of them, of course, but no camp was comprised entirely of one way of thinking, thank God.
Right. Right.
But the vast majority of Red Warriors, were and are, dedicated, disciplined, courageous, brave people, and I would be proud to stand on a front line, and I did, with them at any time, at any place, in defense of our treaty rights and to protect water, any water, all water. I was troubled by the statement that Red Warrior was violent. I heard allegations of rape. I heard allegations of embezzlement. But when it came to the actions themselves, Red Warrior is the reason why their actions that they planned and carried out on their own are the reason why such awareness was raised. Happy American Horse locking himself down to that piece of equipment was a Red Warrior direct action. Mm-hmm. They had a couple of missteps. One was an egregious misstep, in my opinion. They had an action at a cemetery in Burleigh County that I did not agree with, but that was not violent. You know, and I watched the live feed as I sat there saying, I don't agree with this, but I can't. But that's the point of the movement. You know, they did a couple things I didn't agree with. I didn't like some of the leadership decisions that emanated from other. But ultimately, they're not just allies; they're relatives, and we're in the same struggle. And I will not condemn them wholesale. I will not condemn their leadership wholesale because they had kind of a flexible leadership. I mean, as it should be. You know, just the different voices had different says over different things. And
right. So in the beginning, we had Cody Hall as their media person, and then he split with them. There was a lot of changes, and and just like the movement as a whole is not represented by that 1%. Like there may be an element in Red Warrior that was not savory, but that doesn't represent everybody who was in Red Warrior, like you're saying.
And the story that the young man, well, young for me, provided about a particular individual that he went into a little detail on. I was aware of this individual. I was a former Facebook friend with him. I was aware of the allegations, and I saw what he is purported to have sent to, what would definitely be people who would not be appropriate for him to be contacting, let alone messaging what he messaged. But that's not what Red Warrior was about, and that's not what Ochete Shikoni was about, and that's not what our movement was about. I'll say again, Kira, any movement that is worth the time and effort needed to sustain it must be willing to be not only self-aware, but self-critical. And willing to evolve over time in terms of spokespeople and leadership and membership. Personalities clash. Misguided leaders are exposed, and then new leadership organically emerges or the movement goes away. New leadership emerges as lessons are learned. So I will again emphasize patience. And if offering criticism, there's ways of getting your point across strongly and forcefully that will not sow seeds of dissension to the point where people will not work with one another just based on statements. And that's what I see happening. It happens in almost all social movements. It's happening in ours. And I would just keep emphasizing to people not to focus on the negative. We can talk about the negative, but we cannot focus on it. And to allow everyone their say, to try and listen to what everyone has to say, make up your own mind and do what's best for you and your people.
Yeah, everybody should have a say, and I think, in terms of the Indigenous Environmental Network criticism, not everybody would get their say. Certainly, if we played by their rules. So, for myself, I've said outright, Dallas, you're a leader, so you're going to get called out by the contraries. That's just what's going to happen. Any leader is subject to that. And every leader has to accept not everybody's going to like you no matter what you do or say. Right, exactly. And I've said that there is a level of gatekeeping that goes on with them that isn't fair, but hey, I've been making my way around it for many, many years now. And I think that everybody else should too. So
I remember you deliberately not getting credentialed when you arrived at Ochete Shikoni in November because, the blessed little anarchist heart that you possess would not allow it. And we joked about it, we laughed about it, and I totally supported and agreed with it. And you went about and you did your work in a great way. It raised tremendous awareness and support for the camps, and you didn't need the blessings of the IEN or whatever their acronym is. You didn't need that at all. And that's why I'm trying to tell people in my circle, don't worry about what gets said. A lot of things get said, Kira, and I swear to you, they go in my left ear and right out my right. I was at the camps, and I spent significant time there, and I participated in actions, proudly so, followed people, and didn't follow others. And sometimes, as you know, we just followed ourselves. And it's just, we can't get too caught up in the personalities, and don't. Well, I know who I want to work with. I know who I do not want to work with coming out of Ochete Shikome. I don't need to put it on blast on social media. I don't need to say it on this radio program right now. I just need to go about my business. And as you know, that's what I've been about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been quite a ride, and I really don't think that Tashina, your daughter's story, would have ever really been truly told had I not done that interview with her, because that there were certain
going back to when we first appeared on your show, that was the Saturday following the action, which happened on a Monday. And I remember vividly the conversations we had leading up to that, where I described to you what was happening in the camp by the so-called one percenters, the elders and the tribal leadership, where they were condemning the action that shut down the work at the site at that time, way back in August when everything first began. And that the girls who participated were hanging their heads because they were getting put on blast on the camp radio by people. And I had enough. We had enough. So that we went on your program and told the story, that broke it. People after that, they took their proper place, those girls who charged the machinery, and that is as heroes. And our modern day warriors, our new warriors, not our sons but our daughters, and doing it not with weapons in their hands but with sage in their hands. You broke that story.
Yeah.
And we were able to change the narrative, control the narratives ourselves. I didn't get on your program and blast Dave Archambault. I didn't get on your program and blast several of the elders' names that some of your listeners, if not a lot of them, would recognize from up there. There was no need to. We just had to tell our story, tell it truthfully and tell it honestly. And it resonated, and I think that's what we need to do now. Do not focus on the negative. I cannot believe they are still talking about Rosal here in June. I can't. I am not a one percenter. I am just a Ikchewi Chasha, a common man of the Tazipsho Lakota band living in Sinkala Luzaha community, the Swiftburg community here. I have this thing called the internet at my home, and I used it to do my own research and to make phone calls. And I relied on particularly one friend, a mutual friend of ours in particular. She provided me with great information about it. And this was clear back in December, and she shared and she told me what to look for and what to read. And I did so myself. And I found websites that talked about Rosal. And I listened to the anecdotal stories emerging from Ochete Shikome, one group in particular, who I will not even name them to give them any credence whatsoever, maintain that there was Rosal poisoning up there. And they came up with this alleged results of these blood tests, and it showed Rosal in letters and the results of this blood screen. Well, I had some news for them. And Rosal is a brand name for a chemical that is an anticoagulant that kills rodents, and it causes massive hemorrhaging in the internal organs and leads to death in rodents. And what was used up there, the number was accurate, 20 tons was purchased by the then operator of the Cannonball Ranch. But I've also seen the maps as required by law where that poison was laid. And it is true that some of the poison was laid in prairie dog towns that were near what became known as either the Sacred Ground Camp or the 1851 camp, depending on which camp you're in. But then I did more reading, and I found the information that is provided online that anybody can access by the Pesticide Management Education Program. I'm going to refer to my notes here real quick. The Pesticide Management Education Program, which is a cooperative extension through Cornell University in New York. And the Pesticide Safety Education Program, now I'm reading from my notes, is a federally mandated program whose primary mission is to provide unbiased information about pests and pesticides and to promote sound decision-making and safe handling practices to people who choose to use pesticides. And reading through the information they provided on the chemical, which is chlorofacinone, I believe it's called, that is the active ingredient, a lethal chemical contained within Rosal, but it's also marketed under 5 other brand names. So that if somebody is purporting to have a blood test that has the word Rosal on it or is testing positive for it in their system, you know it's fraudulent because it would identify the chemical and not the brand name. And it's just proceeding from that point to read the literature on the chemical, the amount needed by an individual human being, the amount needed to be ingested by an individual human being is gargantuan to cause even symptoms, let alone death or the camp cough. You know, I am tired of that narrative coming out of Ochete Shikoni. It's a false narrative being promoted for reasons that I do not know by individuals who I do not know, and I suspect I do not want to know, whatever their motivations are. But I want to assure everyone listening here, I had camp cough, as you know, Kira. And in fact, I was quite sickened by it for an extended period of time, and it took me weeks to recover from it. Well, anytime you have a camp of that nature where there are open fires burning, especially the amount that were in Ochete Shikoni, a bug emerges that has been referred to for over a century now as camp cough during the Civil War, the American Civil War. Camp cough was the term for an unknown respiratory bug that ravaged Union camps. So we just up north we had a situation where the people, for whatever reasons, like I said, I do not know, are trying to make this into an issue, and it is a non-issue. And I would encourage people who might doubt what I am saying to get on that device of whatever one they use to access the interwebs and do their own research. And they will see what I have learned, which is, whatever illness I contracted up there, and I was sick a few times, very sick with respiratory illness. It was not related to any prairie dog poisoning spread. In actuality, a good mile and a half from where the main camp was located.
Yeah, I got the camp cough too, and it was brutal. I think everybody did who went there.
And you saw the close quarters everybody was living in. We're talking about a respiratory illness. People, large numbers of people, sleeping together and spending, because of the weather, large amounts of time within teepees, tents, yurts with each other in close proximity. If you just look at it from that viewpoint. And then at night, often when returning from the south, either from the casino or Cheyenne River, particularly at dusk, you could see the smoke and haze that was above the camp from vehicular exhaust, from the open campfires that were burning. We were breathing that in for months. Those of us who were there for a sustained period, and even someone such as yourself who was just there for a couple of weeks, we know what it's resulted in, and I don't think we have to go very far. We don't have to look at any grand conspiracies. We don't have to look at any deliberate poisoning of our people to find the reasons why camp cough occurred.
I remember when I was there was also the people who were alleging that they saw the planes spraying stuff on people too. So there was that narrative that was going on, and then I think the poisoning one came out a little bit after that.
No, I could tell you, I was in camp, and for the duration I was, for the number of days and nights that I were, that plane, not just one plane, but several planes, but two in particular, circled us more times than I can easily count, or that probably could be counted. I never once saw anything dispersed from a wing, from a tail, from the underbody. Now, there is one person and one person only who told me that they saw with their own eyes something coming out, a mist coming out from underneath the plane one time in the pre-dawn hours. And that is the only person with whom I know I can trust who or who I do trust, who has made that claim. Other than that, the only time I was aware of a plane spraying anything was at that one action that was quite bad for our people, where that crop duster released whatever it did release over not just our people, but the law enforcement people as well.
Right. Yeah, so that was very odd, because if it was trying to dust a crop, it was flying pretty high.
Here, you talk about the counterinsurgency playbook. Wouldn't that play into a narrative that benefits them, that leads to the dissension that continues to this day? And too many people focusing on a non-event, the poisoning of our people, or at least a deliberate, that the government or some, ETP, Energy Transfer Partners, or somebody was behind it. And it's just, and look at what it's created. It created immediate fear, if not terror, among our people.
You could see the terror on people's faces and in their voices in that live.
What would to me a more likely scenario would be is that spraying was done to put those seeds into people's mind, and look at the fruit it bore.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, and this I'm thinking of as we're talking about it, where they're claiming the Rosal poisoning took place, is where they themselves, and by they I mean Morton County Sheriff's Department, the National Guard, and all law enforcement attached to them, that's where they set up their camps. They obviously
on top of the Rosal.
Exactly, where on the Cannonball Ranch is where, when you saw the aerial views provided by our relatives who had drones there, that they were living there. We weren't living there; they lived there, so they obviously had no fear of Rosal poisoning there.
Well, I mean, certainly we don't want this to be true. So these are, facts to consider as well. And it would be, I hope that nobody did get poisoned. I really do. And I haven't met anybody who was bleeding out or anything like that, or had those type of symptoms. We all had a cough. We were all tired. We all had trouble sleeping. All of those things, So, and then when you go through periods of no sleep and you're under this type of stress, those type of seeds get planted pretty deep. And you're also dealing with generational trauma, and you're dealing with the trauma of that particular whatever, action of the day. Oh my goodness, it's already, we're already done. Thanks so much for coming back.
You're welcome. Thank you as always, Kira. It's always an honor and a pleasure. I mean it.
Thank you so much for the listeners, too, and thank you for our guests in the first hour. Catch you next week, everyone.